Welcome to the Energy Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Lewin. In 2020, at the annual meeting of the Greater Houston Partnership, the city's powerful chamber of commerce and economic development organization with a heavy concentration of oil and gas companies, Bobby Tudor, the incoming chairman of the board, told the membership, quote, "The oil and gas business is not likely to be the same engine for Houston's growth over the next 25 years that it's been in the past 25 years. He added further, quote, "We can lead the energy transition. There is fantastic business opportunity for us in this effort. It's necessary and it's the right thing to do. Houston is about making things happen, and we can lead this energy transition. We should be driving the discussion." End quote. As any person who follows Texas politics and the political economy of the state knows, Tudor's speech signaled a major shift. An organization that represented some of the most influential oil and gas and petrochemical interests in the state made clear it would no longer be fighting the energy transition. Instead, it decided to lead it. Following the speech, the partnership launched the Houston Energy Transition Initiative, or HETI, to build on traditional energy skills and systems to leverage Houston's industry leadership and accelerate global solutions for an energy-abundant, low-carbon future. My guest today, Jane Stricker, is the executive director of that effort, the Houston Energy Transition Initiative, where she leads a coalition of industry, academia, and community partners to ensure the long-term economic competitiveness and advancement of the Houston region toward a net zero emissions future. Prior to joining HETI, Jane spent over 20 years at BP in a variety of roles. She has considerable expertise in engaging and transitioning oil and gas industries in the energy transition. During the interview, Jane and I discussed how the skills, knowledge, and resources from the oil and gas industry and its workforce can be leveraged to advance the clean energy transition. We dug into the opportunities for job creation, the need for workforce development and training, the potential and challenges of hydrogen hubs, including the high velocity hub chosen by DOE in the Houston area, the importance of engaging and responding to the communities that have been disproportionately harmed by fossil fuels, the necessity of innovating business models and technology, and much, much more. This was a great discussion, and I hope you enjoy it and learn a lot about Houston's role, its risks, and its opportunities in the energy transition. If you do, I hope you will like and share this episode and give the podcast a 5-star review wherever you listen. And finally, this episode is for paid subscribers. If you're not already, please become a paid subscriber to the Energy Capital Podcast and the Texas Energy Empowered newsletter. It's one subscription at douglewin.com. That's DOUGLEWIN.com. You'll get access to all the podcasts, the full newsletter archives, the Texas Grid Roundup for paid subscribers only, and subscriber-only chats, discussions, and presentations. I never want the ability to pay to be a barrier. If you can't afford a subscription for whatever reason, please send a request for a complimentary subscription to douglewin@substack.com. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being a subscriber, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Jane Stricker, welcome to the Energy Capital Podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Doug. Great to be here.
Really excited for this conversation. A lot of great things happening in Houston, and you're right at the center of so many of them. Let's just jump right in. I think for a lot of people, when they think of Houston, they think oil and gas, they think energy, they think maybe energy capital because they've heard it called the energy capital of the world, energy capital of the US, all sorts of different things. But they may not think as much about the energy transition. And of course, you lead the Houston Energy Transition Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about Houston's place, not only in the energy world, but also why Houston is and maybe could be even more at the center of the energy transition?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Doug. And it's really great to be here and be a part of the podcast with you. So thanks for the invite. I joined the Greater Houston Partnership a little over 2 years ago now to lead what we call the Houston Energy Transition Initiative. And this really came, the genesis was Bobby Tudor, former chair of Tudor, Pickering and Holt, now with Artemis Energy Partners, was the chair of the Greater Houston Partnership. And the benefit of being the chair of the Greater Houston Partnership is you get to pick the issue that you want to focus your year of service on. And in 2020, Bobby recognized that, we needed to start thinking about how to get Houston ahead of the curve on energy transition. he saw it as a real opportunity for us to have great economic growth in the long term. The other piece that he recognized is that as industry continues to get more efficient in what it does, jobs contract. So ultimately, over time, as production increases, jobs decrease. You can look at a million charts that will show you that. And so, how are we going to ensure that this industry of energy broadly across the board really continues to be a mechanism and a vehicle for growth and jobs in this region in the long term? And that was really where HETI began. So that kicked off about a year of work that McKinsey did to really look at what were the implications for Houston under a business as usual scenario where we just sort of continued to focus on the core businesses that have always brought success to this region, the traditional, what you call traditional or incumbent energy businesses, versus if we really look to position Houston as an all of the above energy city, recognizing that with the dual challenge, we really are trying to solve for both energy production and delivery. The world's going to need more of it and a lot of it, but also solving for the climate challenge of how do we do all of that with significantly lower emissions and prevent the worst impacts of climate change. And so if we really wanted to think about it that way, what did we need to do differently in the way we've thought about energy and the energy industry in Houston? And that was really where HETI came from. And so McKinsey's analysis really showed that we ran as a business as usual, again, consolidation, we would continue to shed jobs over time. But if we really took advantage of our opportunity to drive energy transition solutions, technology development, and ultimately scale here in Houston, we could actually create as many as 500,000 new jobs in this region over the next 20 years or so. And that was really where it began. And so we brought together the partnership. Now it's about 25 of energy companies from across the spectrum. So, we've got power producers, we've got utilities, we've got oil and gas, integrated, independents, solar. And so really full value chain of energy solutions, really thinking about how do we position Houston to continue to be a vehicle for great economic growth and development and equitable economic growth and development across the region for the long term as we solve for the dual challenge.
Yeah, and we'll put links in the show notes so folks can look at the membership. It really is, I think really important and impactful to have such a great group put their collective weight behind something called the Houston Energy Transition Initiative. And we'll talk more about what you guys are doing as you go into it. But before we do that, I want to dive a little deeper on the Bobby Tudor speech you just referenced, because I remember at the time reading that and going, it felt to me like a little bit of a watershed, simply because the Greater Houston Partnership is such an important institution in Houston and in Texas and in the country and in the world, right? To have for folks that don't know, it is a chamber of commerce, but also with a lot of obviously economic development focus and all that. And for Bobby Tudor to make that speech, and he said a couple things in there that I think are really important, and you referenced them. I just want to dive a little bit deeper into these because I just think it's so important. He said, and I'm quoting from it, the traditional oil and gas business is not likely to be the same engine for Houston's growth in the next 25 years. And he said Houston has an opportunity, and I love this phrasing, opportunity and responsibility to lead the energy transition. And I think, he said some things that I think, regardless of what your viewpoint is, you may not love, one or maybe both of these things. But he said oil and gas have been really good to Houston. It's not going away anytime soon. But as I just read, not going to be probably as big in 25 years as it was before. But it's not going away right away. And climate change is quite real, and investment dollars are flowing that way. And that's that opportunity part. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that. This notion of both sides of that, the opportunity and the responsibility for Houston. Can you talk a little bit about both of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I always think back to a statement somebody made one time that two things can be true at the same time. And I feel like we are living in a time where there's a belief that two things can't be correct at the same time or true at the same time. And for me, fundamentally, these two things are true at the same time. This industry has made life around the globe significantly better and improved. And every chart and every piece of data will show that one of the biggest drivers for bringing parts of the world out of poverty is access to affordable energy to be able to do a lot of the things that life needs to be able to do, and do it more efficiently. And so that is absolutely critical. And so the opportunity that that presents when you think about 2 billion more people on the planet and growth and all of the things that are going to require more energy, this industry and this region has a huge opportunity to be the leaders in figuring out how to do that and do it with less emissions. And on the responsibility side, there is an acknowledgement that the products that are made and sold today are creating more CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. And we absolutely have to find ways to reduce the carbon intensity of the products that are being made and sold and used around the world to produce energy. So, it is two sides of a coin. And what I've seen over the last 2 years in this role is the level of commitment of industry at large to solving for both of those problems. And so having the ability to work on that in Houston, I think is very unique because we are bringing the biggest energy leaders from around the world together to solve this challenge, and also think about, how do we accelerate the deployment of new technologies. We know that this is going to be a technology game. So how do we take the things that we are really good at doing in Houston, scaling energy solutions, and apply them to the new technologies and new solutions for the future?
Yeah, that's well said. I actually want to dive deeper into the both of those are so important, the responsibility and the opportunity. But let's focus some on the opportunity, because you talked about the McKinsey study y'all did at the onset of this, the outset rather of this project, and the potential for 500,000 new jobs. There's something like, I think it's around 150, 200,000, correct me if I've got that wrong, but oil and gas jobs in the Houston area. And you're looking at the potential for a multiple of that. Can you talk about some of the things that the oil and gas industry does well, the expertise, the knowledge and skills, whether that be physical in terms of engineering or financial know-how, right? I mean, all of that. This is what I often try to talk to people about, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, is we have such a huge job ahead of us to reduce carbon emissions. It's going to take as big a tent as possible. And we could probably maybe get there without the oil and gas industry, but man, it would be harder and it would take so much longer. Yeah, if you would. And of course, and maybe this would be a good time also to ask you a little bit about your own career and what you've done, because you've seen this kind of firsthand, but also to talk about the skills and knowledge the industry has and how that can be applied to the energy transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think I spent, as you noted, I spent 20 years at BP, and am not a technical person by background, worked more on the financial and the business side of the BP businesses, but really had the opportunity to work with brilliant people, and brilliant engineers and folks who really care about this issue. And I think the same is true for every one of the companies around here. They care about this issue. Their employees care about this issue. We all want the world to be a better place to live in. We all want to solve for this challenge. And what I think we have in Houston is access to some of the best engineering minds, some of the best, scientific and research minds that really understand how do energy systems fit together. I mean, this isn't just solving for how do we produce energy in one place for one group of people. These things have to be interconnected. We have an energy system across this country and across the world that relies on pieces being interconnected. And I think what this industry does really well is it understands how to integrate solutions and systems and develop things at scale. And so while we've got a lot of really great early stage companies that are more and more moving here to Houston with new ideas on technologies that can help reduce emissions, either in the production phase or in the distribution phase or in the use phase of energy, someone has to figure out how to make all of those work in our existing system. We simply can't afford to just get rid of everything that we already have and start from scratch. So we have to find a way to integrate the new in with the existing. And so I think that's one thing, the inherent knowledge and capability that exists in this region of people who understand how these energy systems were built, how they operate, and how they can be leveraged to be more efficient, I think is key. On the resources side, again, I think there's, since the shale boom, Houston has really become the hub of energy investment activity as well, because this is where decision making around capital investment is led from. So regardless of whether those projects are happening on the other side of the world, the other side of the state, or the other side of the country, by and large, a lot of that decision making is happening here. And so the investment is being led from here as well. And so one of the things we do at HETI is we bring together the investment community, private equity investment banks, and VC to say, how do we make sure that we're actually getting capital in the right places and able to scale up? And how do we make sure Houston continues to really be the leader in energy transition investment? The other piece is the balance sheets. I mean, there aren't a lot of companies in the world with the size balance sheet of a lot of these big integrated energy companies. They are going to be the ones who can afford to execute major projects. And so, we did a study back in 22 around the capital investment for energy transition and Houston's role leading that. And what we saw was of the, roughly $30 billion that had been invested in energy transition in 2021, fully 25 billion of that was coming from the incumbent energy industry. And so I think a lot of people are under a false impression that because these companies are so big, because they're still putting resources into their traditional energy businesses, that they're not invested in energy transition solutions. And the reality is they're putting a lot of investment into particularly those things that are adjacent to their traditional businesses: carbon capture technologies, e-fuels technologies, renewable fuels, and hydrogen. All of those things really leverage the skill sets, the capabilities, and the assets that already exist within this group of companies. And so it's really, how do you leverage that so that you can scale up new solutions for a lower carbon energy future?
Yeah, I was actually just spending some time the last couple of weeks reading through the International Energy Agency's report, Oil and Gas and the Energy Transition. And I think one of the conclusions that they make, they maybe don't say this like directly as a headline, but at least maybe this is what one of the things I took from it is that there is investment happening from the oil and gas industry and energy transition, but it's not happening fast enough. Now, this is a global report. It wasn't about Houston or about Texas or anything like that specifically. But I actually share that view. I think that we need to accelerate, and I'm very hopeful that y'all are playing this kind of catalytic role, like you said, to bring these people together, capital and financial folks that have the engineering chops, and bringing people together to kind of see where those opportunities are.
Yeah.
Another thing the IEA has told us is that, again, globally, this is again not specific to Houston. But globally, investment in oil and gas has been basically flat since 2015, which is still high. It's like $1 trillion or somewhere right around there. But the investments in clean energy have grown, almost doubled, like 80% or something over that same time period. And so this is where that potential and opportunity for Houston is. I think of the word pivot for those that, we're recording at the beginning of the basketball playoffs. If you're a basketball fan, right? If you think of what pivot is, right? You have your foot in one place, but you're moving the other foot somewhere else, right? And I think a lot of that's going on. Can you just pick one of those things, whatever maybe you're most excited about? You mentioned hydrogen, carbon capture. I mean, there's so many different ways that the expertise in the industry could be leveraged. I just recorded an interview with Cindy Taff of Sage Geosystems, who was in oil and gas for 36 years and has now started a geothermal company. We could talk about bioenergy. We could talk about offshore wind. We could talk about methane detection and reductions. There's so many different ways, but maybe pick one of those that it's sort of like asking you which one of your children do you love the most, but pick one and maybe just talk about how you're seeing that play out in the Houston ecosystem. Thank you for listening to this free preview of the Energy Capital podcast. You can access the entire episode as well as archives of articles from the Texas Energy and Power newsletter if you become a paid subscriber today at DougLewin.com. That's DougLewin.com. You'll also be able to attend paid subscriber-only chats and webinars. Please check it out, and thank you for listening. Again, that's DougLewin.com. Have a great day.